In the quiet village of Homosassa, 45 miles north of Tampa along Florida's Gulf Coast, life moved at a pace so slow it barely seemed to move at all. Mark Lunsford had chosen this tranquil place in 2004 to raise his 9-year-old daughter, Jessica, moving in with his parents, Archie and Ruth, to their home on Sonata Street. For Mark, a single father who had cared for his daughter since birth, it seemed like the perfect environment. Jessica was his entire world, inseparable from him, a bright and happy child everyone called Jessie. Jessie thrived in her new surroundings. She attended church youth group every Wednesday, spent time with friends, and joined her father on motorcycle rides and visits to construction sites where he operated heavy equipment. On the evening of February 24, 2005, everything appeared normal. Sharon Armstrong, a family friend, picked Jessie up after church like she had been doing for months. The girls sang songs and practiced for a play, their voices filling the car with innocent energy. When Sharon dropped Jessie home that night, nothing seemed unusual. Jessie showed her grandmother the gymnastics moves she had learned, performed her routine on the couch, and went to bed around 10 o'clock. Ruth tucked her in like always. Half an hour later, Mark left for his girlfriend's house 3 miles away. The household fell quiet. By morning, everything had changed. When Mark returned home, Jessie's alarm was ringing. He opened her bedroom door expecting to see his daughter, but the bed was empty. A knot formed in his throat. He woke his parents, asking where Jessie was. Ruth insisted she was in bed, but Mark's voice cut through the confusion. "No, she's not." Panic spread quickly. Mark searched the house, hoping Jessie was playing a game, hiding somewhere. He ran outside calling her name, his voice growing desperate. "Jessie, Jessie," but there was no answer. Ruth dialed emergency services, her hands shaking. "We have a child missing. She's 9 years old. She would never run away. She's gone. I need help." Citrus County Sheriff's Deputy Juan Santiago arrived at the Lunsford home and immediately sensed something was wrong. The grandmother's face showed a level of distress that went beyond ordinary worry. Santiago surveyed the property. There were no footprints, no pry marks on doors or windows, no signs of struggle. Jessie's bedroom looked untouched. Her clothes for school were laid out. Her shoes sat by the chair. The only thing missing was her purple dolphin, a stuffed animal Mark had won for her at the state fair. Santiago knew this was serious. He alerted his supervisor, his exact words carrying the weight of his concern. "This doesn't look good." Orders came to seal off the house. Other deputies located Mark, who was still searching frantically. 2 officers pulled up beside him and asked him to get in the car. Mark protested, saying he was looking for his daughter, but they insisted. He was taken back to the house. Meanwhile, Detective Gary Ayrson received the missing child report. At first, he assumed it was routine, that Jessie had gone to a friend's house or was hiding somewhere nearby. But as details emerged, it became clear this was anything but routine. The FBI was contacted. Special Agent Scott Boland, who had just finished another child abduction case with a happy ending, hoped for a similar outcome here. Investigators faced a troubling puzzle. Jessie was last seen at 10 o'clock, but there were no signs of a struggle, and neither the family nor the family dog had heard anything during the night. The only clue was a small speck of dirt on Jessie's pillowcase, about half the size of a fingernail. Sheriff Jeff Dossie noted that Mark worked as a truck driver for a landscaping company. The lack of obvious signs pointed to the possibility that Jessie may have left willingly, perhaps with someone she knew. When children disappear from inside a home, it is often someone close to them. Investigators had to start with the family. The FBI set up a mobile command center at the Lunsford home, and agents began questioning Mark, Archie, and Ruth. The interrogations were blunt and relentless. Mark grew angry as investigators pointed fingers, but they had a job to do. They needed answers. Mark was asked to take a polygraph test. The results came back inconclusive, which only added to the frustration. Next came Archie, who was grilled for 6 hours. Detectives pressed him about a past arrest involving an assault charge from 50 years earlier. Though the charges had been dropped, it raised suspicions. Investigators even lied to Mark, telling him they had found Jessie's blood on Archie's underwear, hoping to provoke a confession. Mark confronted his father in tears, asking if he knew where Jesse was. Archie denied any involvement, heartbroken that his own son would doubt him. He also took a polygraph test, which also came back inconclusive. Investigators shifted focus to Jesse's mother, who had left the family 8 years earlier. Mark had been awarded sole custody and had lost touch with his ex-wife. The FBI tracked her down in Cincinnati. She had not seen Jesse in years and provided a solid alibi, supported by receipts and work records. Days passed without a breakthrough. Then came word that a body had been found in a lake 75 miles away. Sheriff Dossie personally informed Mark. The wait was agonizing, but the body turned out to be an adult, a victim of an unrelated crime. The relief was temporary, but hope remained that Jesse might still be alive. A massive search effort was launched. Volunteers combed through the neighborhood. Search dogs picked up Jesse's scent in the yard, followed it to the road and stopped, suggesting she had been taken away in a vehicle. Investigators turned their attention to registered sex offenders in the area. There were about 50 in the surrounding zip codes. Teams visited each one, starting within a half-mile radius and expanding outward. Time was slipping away, and everyone knew the first hours were critical. During the neighborhood canvass, deputies noticed a rental home with heavy activity. The residents were known drug users, but they had already been searched. Investigators continued checking sex offenders, determined to account for everyone in the county. Then they found that one name on the list could not be located. John Cooey, a registered sex offender, was missing. Cooey had been convicted years earlier for entering a home, going into a young girl's bedroom, placing his hand over her mouth and kissing her. He had been sentenced to 10 years but served less than 2. His registered address was an abandoned trailer. When detectives asked around, they learned that Cooey's sister lived directly across the street from the Lunsford home. Cooey had been staying there, but he had left days after Jesse disappeared. Bells went off. A registered sex offender had been living within 150 yards of Jesse's house, and no one had known. Cooey had left for Savannah. Investigators learned he had been in the home at night, stalking the neighborhood, watching where children lived. Georgia police were alerted. Cooey was spotted getting off a bus and was taken in for questioning. At first, he seemed calm, even a little nervous, but not overly so. He said he had heard about the case and knew they would want to talk to him. Without a warrant, investigators had to release him, but they were not done. Detectives convinced Cooey's sister to allow a search of her trailer. In his bedroom, they found a mattress with bloodstains. Days later, investigators traveled to Savannah. Sheriff Dossie released Cooey's name and photo to the media, calling him a person of interest. The next morning, an alert citizen spotted Cooey walking toward a bus station in Augusta, Georgia. She asked his name and he confirmed it. Cooey was detained. Florida investigators raced to Augusta for a face-to-face interview. Cooey was nonchalant, his voice raspy. He said he knew why they were there, but he denied involvement. Investigators pressed him. "If you did this, you need to tell me." At one point, Cooey turned and said, "You're about to make me tell you I did it, and I didn't." At the end of the interview, investigators were not convinced he was responsible. They asked him to take a polygraph test, and he agreed. Agent Terry Wetmore spent 2 hours administering the exam. Afterward, Wetmore told Cooey he had failed the test and that he knew Cooey had taken Jesse. Cooey paused, then said, "All right, I did it. I took her." Hearts sank. Investigators had to concentrate on keeping their composure. Cooey confessed that he had watched Jesse playing in her yard days before. On the night of the abduction, in a drug-induced haze, he walked into the Lunsford home through the back door. He went to Jesse's bedroom. How he did so without waking her remains unknown. He told Jesse he was taking her to her father. He carried her across the street to his sister's trailer. He raped her in his room and kept her tied up in his closet. When investigators and search dogs swarmed the neighborhood, Cooey panicked. Jesse asked if she could go home, and he promised she would. He told her to step into garbage bags, which she did. He tied the bags around her, carried her over his shoulder, and placed her in a grave he had already dug. He buried her and stood on the ground as she tried to stand up. Cooey told investigators where to find her. Police raced to the scene and taped off the area. Mark stood in the driveway and watched as officers carefully removed dirt with their hands, pulling his little girl out of the ground in a trash bag. He walked away. Jessie was buried in a 4-foot grave, wrapped in 2 garbage bags in a kneeling position. Her hands were bound as if in prayer. She was clutching her purple dolphin. She had been in the ground for 2.5 weeks. The medical examiner concluded that Jessie had been alive for only a few hours after she was abducted and raped. Investigators believe the dirt on Jessie's pillow likely came from Cui's gloves, suggesting he had dug the grave before kidnapping her. Everything had happened within a few hours before dawn, before she was discovered missing. Forensic evidence from Cui's trailer cleared the Lunsford family of all suspicion. State Attorney Pete Magrino prepared the case for trial. He was determined to ensure justice for Jessie. During his closing argument, Magrino used a purple dolphin to represent Jessie. He placed the dolphin in one garbage bag, then another, tying it up while describing what Cui had done to the little girl. The jury was moved. They convicted John Cui of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced him to death. 2 years later, Cui died in prison before the sentence could be carried out. Since the tragedy, Mark Lunsford became an advocate for stronger laws monitoring sex offenders. He spearheaded what became known as Jessie's Law, which has been adopted in some form by 46 states. The law targets repeat predators and sex offenders, allowing for life sentences. Mark has said it is not always about watching children more closely. We watched ours. She didn't go anywhere. She rode her bicycle up and down this street. Jessie's death left a lasting impact on everyone involved in the search. Agent Boland recalled getting down on his knees before Ruth, apologizing not just for what happened to Jessie, but for what he had said about her family during the investigation. Ruth looked at him and said, "Son, you were just doing your job. I love you now just like I loved you then. You don't have to worry about a thing." Ruth later said she was glad they had Jessie for the time they did, glad she was Jessie's caregiver, and glad Jessie had such a close relationship with her daddy. But she's at rest now. She knows no harm. There was a band of angels that came and gathered around Jessie and took her home. She didn't know any of that pain. That is what I've always believed.